A lot of people are thinking that when the new year comes, that something magical is going to happen. And nothing really is going to happen unless it happens inside of us, right? We say Happy New Year, and it's a wonderful celebration that happens, I think, Wednesday night, right? We're having this celebration, and a lot of people are going to be acting crazy and shouting Happy New Year and all that. But that doesn't really change anything, does it? It's the only change that can really happen is if it happens inside of us, right? Otherwise, it's just a changing of a calendar. I mean, what is time when you think about it? It's just something that we humans have created. It doesn't really, it's not going to, just because it's the new year, doesn't mean anything spectacular is going to happen other than a bunch of shouting and screaming. Thomas Mann once wrote, "Time has no divisions to mark its passage. There's never a thunderstorm or blare of trumpets to announce the beginning of a new month or a new year. It is only we mortals who ring bells and fire off pistols." So it's we who have to change, right? It's accepting and embracing that truth within ourselves. And some people say, well, now that we're after the Christmas celebration and the Hanukkah celebration and all that it's, it's over till next year. It's done. It's over. But the question is, what's over? What exactly is over? Is it the unwrapping of gifts? Is it the eating the food? Is it the parties with family or friends? What exactly is over? Is the inner experience of the presence over? The inner glow isn't over unless we put it back in the box. And so as we enter this new year, we don't want to start the new year without that inner glow, right? We don't want to put that back in the box. We want to continue to remember and bring that inner glow into the new year. Because that's what's going to make it new for us, is what unfolds from within us. What if this... Let me give us a simple way of looking at the past year. And that is to treat it like a tapestry, not as a verdict. To look at this past year, what if it wasn't random moments, but rather one tapestry? Let's look at this past year and without judgment. Let's look at it and see what occurred. When you think of a tapestry, there's no judgment, is there? It's woven. Everything's woven together. And we can look at our past year and look at what were the bright threads of the past year. Not just focus on the knots. That's what a tendency is, to just remember the difficulties. Just remember the challenges. And boy, this year was really a bad year. I can't wait till a new one starts. You ever hear people say that? But what if we looked at it and said, no. What were the bright spots? What were the trouble spots? What were the challenging spots? And what can I learn from these experiences? How did they shape me in this past year? And look at it in that way rather than a judgmental way. And then these can be a positive thing in our life. Nothing was wasted unless we refuse the learning. Because Spirit uses all of it as part of the tapestry of our life. So consider looking at it in that way. And then another thing that we can do as we enter this new year is to stop trying to unhappen the past. It's resistance of things that have already happened that cause a lot of suffering. We don't have to resist what happened. We can look at it and learn from it and grow from it. What did you become from what happened? What can you learn from what happened? Healing is releasing our grip on what has already happened. And so I'd like us to just take a moment and think about, what is something positive that happened in the past year? What is a bright thread that occurred for you in the past year? You think of something really nice that you call good from this past year? And what is something that was challenging for you this past year, that maybe was disappointing, maybe was frustrating, maybe was sad? Is there something that brought out of you? Is it something that you learned from or can learn from now, looking back at it? Have you grown from that experience? So we're not trying to unhappen something and spend a lot of time dwelling on something that happened in the past year. We're simply using it and learning from it and helping it build who we are today. And then we can enter this new year without holding on to something from the past. How many of you want to be free of something that was a weight for you? And that's what we can do. We can look at it as a tapestry. It was all part of our past, of what was unfolding for us, and we can learn and grow from it and move into our new year in a new way, with a new consciousness. I think it's important for us to remember that we're not stuck, that as spiritual beings we can grow, that we're not fixed, that this is just the way I am. You know, I'm just this kind of a person, or I just can't do relationships. I've heard people say that I just don't do relationships well, or I just don't do prosperity well. And they're stuck. I don't get along with people well. And they're stuck in that mindset. But we don't need to be stuck. Life is about growth. Life is about change. We're continuing to unfold. And as we enter the new year, if we really want it to be new, we can't hang on to what's comfortable with what it's been, right? Well, that's just the way I am. That's how I do things. That's how we do things. Now we're staying stuck in the past, aren't we? And yet, how can we really have a new year unless we're willing to grow, unless we're willing to be more? You and I are spiritual beings. We're not something stuck. And that's an important insight. When we think of Scrooge, for instance, Scrooge, right? When you hear the word Scrooge, what do you think of? A lot of people think of a nasty, miserly kind of a person, right? That's not Scrooge, is it? That's not the truth of Scrooge. That's an unfair statement about Scrooge. That is keeping Scrooge stuck, isn't it? Scrooge didn't stay miserly and mean. He experienced a transformation. It says that he became like a father to Tiny Tim. It says he learned how to keep Christmas. Scrooge became a transformed person. And so, in a playful way, referring to Scrooge, he's a good example for all of us. We don't have to stay stuck in what we've been. We don't have to stay stuck in a particular view of ourselves. We can change. We can grow. So what have you been in the past year? What have you struggled with? What have been the high points? What have been the challenging points? Would you like to grow in the new year and truly bring a new consciousness into the new year? If so, say, I do. All right. So here's a exercise for you that we can apply, and it's one that really looks at consciousness. If you want a new year, don't start with pressure, start with honesty. So let's start with honesty. The exercise is to look at different areas of our life: work, health, relationships, loving relationships, finances, spiritual growth. Look at them from this past year and as you feel about them now. The honesty in this is that we're being really real for how we feel about these different areas of our life. And what you can do is take a piece of paper and put a line down the center of the piece of paper. And on the left side, put a minus. And on the right side, put a plus. And let's take work, for example. You take work and you think about, how do you feel about your job? Ask yourself some real questions when you're doing this exercise. How do you feel about your work? How do you feel about your salary? How much do you earn? If you have a negative feeling about your salary, you put it in the left column. How do you feel about the people you work with? Is it a positive? Is it a negative? You put it in the appropriate column. You're getting real. You're looking at, how do I feel about the different areas of work? Use a whole page. Use 2 pages. And then you can take your relationships. How do I feel about my relationships? With my spouse, my partner, my friends, my family. How do I feel about those? Is it a positive or is it a plus? You can take specific relationships that are in your mind and write in that minus column how you feel about it. What's not working for you? See, this is an inventory. This is an honest inventory. And this inventory is an important step. It's practical. You can't transform what you refuse to name. So here's the important next step. Is you take the minuses. How many of you got a minus in a minus column? Yeah, so some of you do already have that minus. So take a minus. Everybody see if you got a minus now in some area. Health, finances, work, relationship, some kind of minus. You take that minus and you transform it. You put it into an ought to statement. This is something the late Eric Butterworth wrote about in his book, The Universe is Calling, where you turn it into an ought to. The ought to is what's possible. The ought to is an intuitive sense that I ought to feel like God is my source. I ought to feel grateful, for instance, with salary. I ought to feel like my salary is a manifestation of God's abundance in my life, and I'm grateful for it, and I'm open to God's prosperity in every area of my life. See, that's the ought to. Maybe the minus is a relationship with a friend or a family member. It's strained. There's distance. I ought to have a loving connection with this person. I ought to be able to have a conversation with this person. I ought to be able to have fun with this person, right? Or at least have a nice time have a loving connection. If it's health, I ought to be able to be healed because God is life and healing life. And God's will for me is healing. I ought to be able to be energetic and vitally alive. Or I ought to be able to be happy. Some people, the minus is loneliness. They're struggling with loneliness. What is the ought to? I ought to be able to feel God's love. I ought to be able to feel my connection with life. I ought to be able to connect with other people and have loving, harmonious relations. You get it? You got the minus column. You turn and convert the minus into an ought to based on potentiality, possibilities. And then here's the next important part. Because we don't want to get into the state of putting it out here all the time, and it's always in front of us. We'll never make the connection, because sometime never gets here. Hopefully in the new year, I'll have loving relationships. Maybe my job will get better. Maybe something sometime in the future will happen. And that's always putting our good off. And that's not what we want to do. We don't want to constantly put it off. It's like, turning on a light switch. If you don't turn the light switch on, you ain't going to get any light. If we're always hoping and anticipating someday I'll be healing. Maybe God will heal me. Maybe God will bring someone into my life. Maybe I'll be healed. Hopefully I'll feel God's connection. That is being disconnected. That's not turning the light on, right? Maybe someday. We want to make the connection now. How do we make that connection? We translate, as we've already done. We took the minus, we turned it into an ought to, because something in us knows I ought to be able to be healed. I ought to be energetic. I ought to be able to connect with people. I ought to be able to feel happy and fulfilled. And now we translate it into I am. I am. I am is God's name in us. God is present now, right? God is present as us. God is present as you. God is omnipresence. I am. Say that with me together. I am. I am. So you take the minus and you translate it into an I am. I am prosperous. I am prosperous. I am loved and loving. I am whole. I am joy. I am balanced. I am. This is how we can have a new year. Happy New Year. Well, that's a wish, isn't it? Have a happy New Year. Hope your New Year's happy. No. I am making my New Year happy. I am happy. I hope in your New Year you find healing. No. I am healed because I am whole. Maybe if something changes in the job. No. I am prosperous and successful. Identifying with what we want to experience. Make sense? I am. I am, claiming it, identifying with it, so that that can become what we bring into the new year. The new year is just a change of the calendar. It's not going to be new unless we're new. I mean, our experience of it, right? The minus column is our attitudes about our life, right? There really are attitudes about the different areas of our life. A sage said, all things are neutral. All things are neutral. Shakespeare said, nothing is good or bad, only thinking makes it so. He was a pretty smart guy. So the minus column's really telling us where our attitudes are about our life. And shocker, maybe those attitudes have some impact on our experiences. So the ought to puts us in touch with what's possible and what is, and the I am helps us to begin to identify with that so that we begin to bring it into our new year. And really this is about faith, isn't it? It's about faith. Because we're having faith that I am created in the image of God, and that God is all the good there is, and that I can bring forth that good, that it's up to me to bring that good forth. And by beginning to identify with it, I'm saying there's much more to me than appearances. That I have all this possibility inside of me. As Jesus said, with God, all things are possible. So what is it that you want to transform in your life? Begin to identify with the person you want to become. Identify with the joy. Identify with the love. Identify with the prosperity. Identify with the creativity. Identify with the joy. Identify with it. Now, this is a wonderful way to begin the new year because you are creating now, you can take all your minuses, transform them into I ams. And you can take all your positives and create I ams with your positives. And now you have a one page of all your I ams that you can get still and read your I am statements and bring that consciousness into the new year. See, what's so powerful about this is it comes out of our own personal experience. You're creating affirmations, declarations out of your own personal experience. You're not getting them out of a book. You're not taking something someone else told you. You're looking right at your life experience, your challenges, your attitudes, and you're transforming them into a declaration of what you want to bring forth. And that's why it's so powerful, because it works directly on our attitudes. Imagine what the new year could be by taking what's been challenging for you in this past year, that your attitudes are a part of, right? You've clearly identified what are your attitudes in those different areas. And now you're changing your attitudes. Now you're thinking differently about those different areas. And that's the new consciousness that you enter the new year. So when everyone on Wednesday night saying Happy New You or New Year, you're knowing Happy New You and Happy New Me. Because you're bringing this new consciousness that you've identified into the new year. Knowing I am supported. I am loved. I am strong. I am prosperous. I am joy. Bring that consciousness into the new year. And then we'll see all kinds of amazing things unfold for us. But it does require our faith, because everything's not going to be up. Everything is not going to be the way we want it to be, because when there's change, there are challenges, right? If you really want to grow, if we really want something new to unfold through us, there's going to be challenges that come with it. And that's where our faith is so important, that we keep walking and turning back to what we know to be true, and that is the presence and activity of God within us. I love that old gate of the year line. I said to a man who stood at the gate of the year, "Give me a light that I may tread safely into the unknown." He replied, "Go out into the darkness and put your hand into the hand of God. That shall be to you better than light and safer than a known way." Let's put our hand in the hand of God. Let us go forth knowing I am, that God is present, God is in me, the good is in me. And let's move forward into whatever unfolds in this new year with faith. Let's get still. And let us take a nice deep breath. What is that minus you put down in your mind? What is the ought to be? And most importantly, what is the I am? Within yourself, know the I am. I am strong. I am prosperous. I am loving. I am God being itself, living itself as me. And I bring in a new year as I bring in this new consciousness of God's presence. And so it is. Amen. Let us give a warm thank you to our musicians today. Let's give them a warm thank you for their wonderful music today. Eddie Watkins, Sherry Hersey, and Rick Cowling. And there's no prayer circle today. Justin Morley is out this morning. Let's send him some loving, healing blessings today. And we do have some coffee, tea, and snacks downstairs if you guys want to come on down and join us for a little bit of time. There is no soulful conversation today either. But next week we've got our annual Burning Bowl Sacred Stone ceremony, and we will have refreshments for that next week. I hope you can join us. Tell a friend, by the way. Bring them in. Get them some good inspiration as we move into the new year. This is a good way to start today. Do your homework. Go back and look at the different areas of your life. Put out the minuses. Write out the ought tos. And put them in I am statements. And let that be part of your prayer life in the new year. Remembering your I ams, to watch those areas transform as you transform. That's the key. So please join me now for our prayer for protection. Together. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. Yea, God, yea, you.